Hello and welcome once again to Baked Beans Garage. No one told me if they wanted a workshop renovation video, so I'm just going to do it anyways. Let's get into it. In a previous video, I gave you a tour of this lovely new shop, but I did mention I live where it's cold now, so I have made some arrangements. But if I'm going to pay to run that thing, I would like to keep the heat in here. And while there is some insulation, it's this rather unimpressive bubble stuff. It does have a heat reflector on one side. That's very luxurious. However, when they install it, they just slap it across the outside of the frame and then screw the siding straight through it. So behind this stud, that insulation is just squished, which makes it very good at conducting heat, which makes it very bad at insulating. And on top of that, it looks rather plain and sad. This foam insulation isn't going to stay looking very nice for very long. So the first thing we'll address today is the walls. By far the biggest and most miserable job. But after that, we'll get to building a little bathroom in the corner over there, and then we'll do some insulation in the ceiling. Then I have some special surprises towards the end that hopefully we'll get to. So for some big boy insulation, I have gone with this 1.5" expanded polystyrene insulation. It also has a heat reflector on one side, so we're double luxurious now. And for the shop drywall, there is some 1/2" OSB. I suspect this is going to be mostly montage. So I vastly underestimated how long this part would take. The last time I talked was like 2 weeks ago now. I didn't cover it in too much detail because you can kind of just tell with your eyeballs what's going on. Now most of it was just measuring and cutting, typical tedium, but this new shop did present some challenges like all of the exposed self-drilling screws that I had to clearance the wood for. That was fun. Also, nothing is square. I don't know what instruments they used to lay things out when they built it, but they couldn't have been that precise. So none of the uprights are plumb, none of the corners are square, and in turn, none of my wood is now square. And finally, of course, reworking and shortening some of the conduit, that was a big pain, but no electrical fires yet. And the ceiling was another challenge entirely. I decided not to close off the rafters for reasons we'll get to later, but I used the same 1.5" foam board insulation. I decided to face the reflective side down. I didn't look it up, I didn't do any research, I just did that because I thought it would look cool. I just clearanced it around the trusses and used these furring strips to secure everything. And after sealing all the gaps with some aluminum foil tape, my only gripe left is that none of the stringers are straight at all, of course, because I put them up. Now I wish I would have painted them too, but it's functional. Now there is more work up there to do, but we'll get to that. In the meantime, I do want to paint this. I have decided to go with this lovely mint chocolate chip color combination that I think mirrors the channel's colors. And then we'll get to framing this wall around the bathroom. So rather predictably, I ran out of paint. So this corner is just one coat, but the rest of it's 2 coats, and it's looking quite spiffy. Big thank you to my parents for coming out and helping with that. I sure do hate painting. And since the sheathing is only supported at the edges, I did want a little more rigidity in there. So I just ran a 2x4 around the whole shop and also used that to cover the color transition. That obviously still needs done right here. But in the meantime, suppose it's time to frame this wall. Now, I've never framed a wall before, and I didn't Google anything. How hard could it be? That indeed was pretty easy, although I do apologize if you actually know how to install a door or frame a wall. I'm sure none of that was right. And if you're particularly astute, you may realize I seem to have forgotten a wall. But if you'd stop being such a silly goose, I'll explain that it's right here. I wanted this one to be removable for activities we'll get to later, now just to make it look like the rest of the place. And aside from running out of sheathing for the roof of the bathroom, I'm pretty pleased with that result. That's just free storage space, so it'll get a floor up there. Anyways, moving back along to the rest of the shop. As you know, I now live in a place where it stands to get a little bit cold, so I need to get some heat in here. Off camera, I did put back up my little diesel heater. Now these are fairly cheap and made for motorhomes and tractor trailers and whatnot, but they do throw quite a lot of heat outside. And I paid for that heat, so I have the exhaust running through some cheapo universal intercooler with some fans blowing across it, and that gets quite a bit of extra heat out of it. So even without running the electric heaters, between that and the big torpedo, it's pretty manageable. However, as I learned when putting up all that insulation, and I should have known to begin with, all of the heat kind of goes up there. So I need to bring it back down. Now this is why I put the insulation where I did instead of closing off the bottom of these rafters, because I think there is plenty of room to put ceiling fans above these trusses. So here I have 3 basic Westinghouse industrial ceiling fans. Westinghouse, my one true love. I don't think we're ready for that lore yet. Anyways, back up on my scaffolding. We will first have to undo my temporary solution, which did work quite well, but it doesn't quite fit the aesthetic I'm going for. My only real challenge is that these steel buildings aren't at all made for these standard American junction boxes to go here. But if I make a hole in my insulation, I think I'll be able to stick one in there. And I think I'll be able to get 2 riv nuts right in the gooch of this roof truss. If you're a returning viewer, you have certainly seen these things before. And I have also since learned the hard way that ceiling fans need a special octagon junction box, not a standard wall junction box. An awfully odd distinction for a country that builds houses out of paper mache and cardboard. And how convenient that I already have the wires for it right here. I will have to move my mounting strips to get that guy on. Hopefully that is the biggest engineering headache. Pretty sure that screw didn't go through the wire. That would be inconvenient. And to get power to it, each fan comes with its own wall-mounted controller for the speed. As you can see, I have done this off camera because it was very tedious and annoying. I had to mount them in this arrangement because each one has a screw on the top and the bottom I have to get to. And feeding all of those, of course, I have added yet another breaker. And at least doing it like this lets me keep track of which fan is which, because I'll forget if they're in a straight line. Anyways, if I have done this right, that should work now. Tremendous. And of course that means I'm ready to put in the other 2 now. Woohoo. And with those up and running, it has made an immediate difference. It is a lot more comfortable both down here on the floor and up in the rafters. Anyways, since I can finally park my big scaffold, I can return the shop to some semblance of order. But worry not, I will ruin it again almost immediately by spending the rest of my money. I said long ago I was never going to do this, but sorry. It is a 2-post lift. I did get both posts. The other one's just over there, and I don't want to move it again. I also said long ago I'd never get a big fancy toolbox, but you've seen my videos, you know how messy it gets in here, so that'll help. It wasn't horribly expensive. I got the white one because now the whole thing is a whiteboard, and I can label things and maybe actually know where they are. And this, finally, a proper air compressor, this big upright 60-gallon unit. And I will admit to re-recording this part because I started installing the lift and it didn't go well at all. Here's that other post I mentioned. Now this is where it's going to live, but it is not quite affixed yet. If we look down at this base, we can see something most unfortunate. As you probably could have guessed, it is Forza Horizon 2 for the Xbox 360. Absolutely dreadful. Also, the wedge anchors that came with the lift didn't work. Now my concrete is already the minimum thickness recommended for this lift, so since these couldn't get to torque and they were just pulling up through, I'm actually going to do the right thing and cut out a footer and cast the studs directly into the concrete. Then I know it's not going anywhere. And that'll be safe and last a long time, but I don't like concrete. I'm going to pay someone to do that, so it can't happen right now. So we'll move along to the compressor. This is the activity I mentioned for the bathroom. As mentioned, it's 60 gallons. It is a stationary type, so it has to be installed where it's not going to move. And I went with such a unit because it is belt driven and the compressor is divorced from the motor and all this is serviceable and replaceable, so it should last a good long time. And this is also why I made this wall removable. And I need to mount that onto some wood because the concrete is a bit harsh. And that ram set I used earlier was a loaner, so now I need to actually find the chuck key for my hammer drill. Now to perform the ritual. That's not going anywhere. And since it is just a compressor, I have to use an external regulator and water separator. So now just to fiddle with a million different pipe fittings and adapters until it's to my liking. I think that will suit my needs, maybe. How do plumbers make this look so easy? Oh, that's probably fine. I do have a fancy retracting hose reel to use, but apparently I bought the wrong fittings, so just another quick connect over here for now. And I suppose it'll work best with some electricity, so it's time to add yet another breaker. there's room for my hose reel in here, so I think I'll tuck it right in this corner and then run the fair lead through that wall. And I did notice a bit of a flaw with the hole for the fair lead, but I have since addressed it. I also added a little hook here, very convenient. And you may notice this is a 1/2-inch hose, which is larger than standard. And I could claim that that's for flow and performance and whatnot, but no, it's because it was free. Nice. And with that all sorted, the bathroom only needs a few more finishing touches. Nice. And with that, that is one completed compressor house / bathroom. So with that, we can finally get back to the lift. And I do imagine there's a picture of this arrangement with a circle and a line through it in the manual, so good thing I didn't read it. But that structural hammer there is a framing hammer, so it should be fine. And this may look quite perilous, but worry not. The roof truss will prevent it from falling on the wagon. It can fall on me all at once, though. I'm sure that's fine. Now, it would be time to start drawing some squares and laying these out for the concrete guys, but well, that happened a lot faster than I thought it would. These new slabs are 12 inches thick. They are both keyed under the existing slab and keyed into it with some rebar. As mentioned, the anchors are now poured into the slab. I happen to know someone with a plasma table, so I got these plates cut out of some 1/8-inch thick steel and then ran some hardened rebar through it and kind of plopped those down in there. So those studs you see go down 14 inches and then there's a big steel plate at the bottom. So I don't think those are going to be the failure point. So it's been about a week. This concrete's going to take about a month to cure completely, but it is more than hard enough to at least set the posts on here and start putting it together. And as sketchy as this arrangement looks, it's actually pretty stable. Of course, all the weight's down here in the bottom. Well, I suppose I can finish putting it together too. I thought that little edit would be more fun than me yapping. All I did was follow the instructions, but I did gloss over leveling it and tensioning the cables. That was a little tedious. But it is up, it goes up and down, so a few more details on the rig itself. It is a Tuxedo TP9 KAC. I went with this model not only because of its formal attire, but also because it is a top plate flavor of lift, which means there's nothing down here on the floor to get in my way. And you may notice it is a bit of an interference fit with the shop, but I did do some measurements, and for the second time in my life, it worked exactly how it did in my head, so I'm quite pleased with that. The only thing I didn't like were these cheap little clips for the hydraulic lines, so I have used my own 8L clamps. Also, I think it's supposed to be wired with an extension cord connector on it, but it's not going to move, so I may as well put a junction box on it, for which I had to make a little bracket. But enough yapping. As mentioned, the concrete isn't completely cured yet, so I don't want to put a whole car on this thing yet, but the Gravely has been sitting here watching ever so patiently. Suppose we'll involve it in the activities. Of course, I had to make up some wooden adapters. I'm sure those are safe enough. It's up there. Appears it'll even stay up there. Nice. Of course, it still runs flawlessly since I restored it, so I don't actually have any work to do under here, but it's nice to see underneath for the first time. If you haven't seen that video, maybe check it out, but I will warn you, my videography skills have come a ways since then. But it works. Both me and my spine are very excited about this. I'm sure that's fine. Well, that's all I can really do right now, so back to some other stuff. Back over here, we'll see that my blasting cabinet fits quite snugly in this little nook, almost as if it were designed that way. Now, if only I had left enough room in there for my dust collector, that would be quite convenient. Oh, hey, I already did that. I also added a little switch right here for the vacuum and the light in there. So that, plus having an air compressor that won't run out of breath after 5 minutes like my old one, that'll come in quite handy for the next big project. We'll get to that. Over here, the rest of my toolbox has shown up. I just wanted to show it off. You'll see I have written things on it. Maybe I'll be able to find things now and then. That'll be nice. And finally, you may have noticed this whole video, there has been quite a lot of branding. Of course, I'm not sponsored by anyone, so yeah, that's a paid service, but one that I'm open to. Sponsors, hit me up. So hopefully by now I've proved I'm serious about making videos. I'm gonna keep doing this. Toolbox will help keep the shop organized and looking spiffy. The lift will help me get more appealing angles for the camera. And just in general, it'll look nicer. And especially in the past few videos, I have noticed what a quality bottleneck my GoPro is for these videos. So while I have a few extra dollars, I suppose I'll do this. Now hopefully that was pretty obvious. I guess I won't know till I edit this. But yes, finally a proper camera, what I can actually play with the lens and the focal length and the exposure and the aperture. In other words, I read online. And if this autofocus actually works as advertised, that means you'll be seeing me in 4K from now on. So maybe I'll have to put some effort into how I look. Probably not. Anyways, the second largest bottleneck with the quality of these videos has been my editing computer. And with the last little bit of money I have finally decided to learn enough about PCs to actually build a proper rig. Of course, I didn't retain anything from what I learned, so I don't know, don't ask me. I used it on the last video and it seems to work pretty well. And finally, lastly, I already said finally, I'm only doing all of this because I got a little bit more out of selling my house than I had anticipated. So don't worry, this will be the only video where I actually go out and spend money. But that was finally, lastly, the last of it. Okay, one more thing, I promise. This is a brand new transmission for a Fox Body Mustang. Of course, it's not going to go in a Fox Body Mustang. This is for the next big project. And this actually is the last of the money I have to spend, so don't expect much going forward. Now, if you recognize a T5, you probably have a pretty good idea what this is going in, but we'll get to it. And lastly, finally, ultimately, for the actual end of the video, I do hope you enjoyed it. Now, if you're new here, just know that spending a bunch of money and then showing things off is certainly not what you can expect from my channel. We will get back to the poverty spec builds in no time. But I do hope that today I have demonstrated that I'm serious about making these videos. I do want to make this my full-time job. Eventually, we'll get there. If you'd like to support me, help out with that, maybe head over to Patreon, where you can see some random, sporadic behind-the-beans content. Thank you to my current Patreon subscribers. I do love you. I also have a shirt you can buy that I forgot to put on for this outro. Links in the description. You can see them down there. And of course, finally, subscribe, leave a like, comment, all that fun stuff. And for the last anyways of the video, anyways, this is the new and improved Baked Beans Garage, but I am still Chinchilla. I will see you next time.